clearly great things happening here, great opportunities and great panels. And I'm really excited about this next one. We are going to be talking about lightning settlement for miners. Very important stuff. I was just talking to Austin on the side over here about helping the United States via the DOE sort of get towards its vision of making sure that we can successfully go across the energy transition as smoothly as possible. So I'm going to be welcome up Nick Ward, and he's going to introduce the panel, and we're going to get going.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. My understanding is the happy hour starts at 5, so we're not keeping you from it. We'll make sure to end on time. My name's Nick Ward. I'm coming here from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm one of the co-founders and assurance director at the Network firm. So we're a CPA firm that solely focuses on the crypto space, typical back office accounting help, outsource CFO services, advisory, audit readiness. And then we also build tools to help your external auditors, audit the crypto more efficiently. So it's awesome to be here. I was at the conference last year, so always good to be back, and really appreciate TBC for having me. So with that, let's go down the line. Panelists, please introduce yourselves and tell us a little about why you're here.
Sounds good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Austin Mitchell, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Synoda. Now, important to understand about me is I've actually spent my career in the energy industry. First was doing academic research focused on methane emissions before moving into oil and gas, and then retail energy, and ultimately working at a regulated public utility. And so in my experience, one of the things that has always been a pain point is there's a disconnect between how value moves in the energy industry. And so think of value being molecules and electrons as energy. That's one source of value. But then you also have the data and the money. These are three value streams that are inherently disconnected by the systems that we use today. And so it's through this experience and working with my co-founders, we've developed a product that enables energy consumers to pay for their energy on a daily basis. And by doing so, you're fundamentally changing the interaction between consumers and suppliers of energy. And what you're able to do is you're able to eliminate the credit risk that exists today for large energy contracts from the equation. And then by eliminating that credit risk, the key thing is that you're unlocking capital, you're bringing more transparency to the space as well, and ultimately you're helping miners, get better commercial terms, with their counterparties than what they're able to do sort of on the traditional way of making payments.
My name is Reagan Cook. I'm a CPA at TaxBit. Prior to my time at TaxBit, I spent time at a Big Four and a Fortune 500 company doing consolidated and external reporting. Made my way to TaxBit when I learned about their mission to build tax and accounting software to enable the digital asset space. So excited to talk with you all today.
Last but not least. So I'm Deputy Attorney Richard Jackson. I work in government. So what am I doing here? Why am I talking to you? So it's two-part. One, obviously representing the state of Oklahoma to demonstrate that we are seeking to be the premier partner to the digital asset industry, not just in the United States, but around the world. And then second, as an advocate for the industry back to government, how we take the lessons learned here with the true innovators on the stage and communicate that back to your government officials, your elected officials, so that this industry can move forward as we start to establish, and I use we to include myself, as we start to move the industry into the mainstream. Because as we've heard, right, where finance and banking goes and where energy goes and where accounting goes, the rest of the industry will follow. And so we're right on that cusp, but there's an engagement problem, a public relations issue that I hope to help resolve on behalf of the industry about how to talk with elected officials, how to engage with your representatives, how to engage with government about moving the industry forward.
All right, thanks everybody. So I think let's start off. I would imagine most of the crowd has a slight understanding of Lightning. You've seen it, or at least that's partly why you're here. But Austin, maybe give us the high level. What is Lightning? How does it operate? And what does it mean, to start?
So important when you were talking about what the Lightning Network is, it's first to just level set on Bitcoin. So when you're thinking about an on-chain transaction today and what the benefits of Bitcoin are, you are dealing with a protocol that is the most decentralized, most secure blockchain in the world. And what we're able to do, the Lightning Network, is a layer 2 application. And so what that means is, you're building software in layers. So you can think of Bitcoin being layer 1, and then Lightning is now a layer 2 application. And so what it does is it borrows those properties of decentralization and of security, but then it removes the time lag of, a block gets confirmed every 10 minutes. With Lightning, it's able to tap into the movement of Bitcoin, but it can do it instantly and for very low cost. And so you've now taken Bitcoin, which on-chain is not really a very functional way to make payments, and now you've put it up to this layer 2, and now you can actually make payments, as fast and as affordably and as securely as any other payment network on the world. And so truly it is, from a payment standpoint, it is better than Visa, than Swift, than all of the other types of payment rails that are out there today. So in summary, think of Lightning as a payment rail built on top of Bitcoin. And then the other one really cool thing to mention about it is that because you're interacting with Bitcoin, it doesn't just have to be Lightning that is or it doesn't just have to be Bitcoin that you're actually interacting with. You can think about other opportunities to use stable coins and things like that, which I know we'll get into in a bit.
Thank you for that. I think everybody here, right, we think of Bitcoin as money. We already did sound money. It's decentralized, and that's partly what probably kept us here and why we're here today. Now, Lightning enables it to be used every day. We've heard Vivek and RFK both touched on, protecting that, allowing people to use it, and having policy that supports that. So, W. Jackson, I'm curious, what do you see at the state level that could be done to help foster that? And is there an opportunity for the industry to be connecting with, you in Oklahoma and then their own state reps to help ensure that's the case?
Sure. So I would say that it's primarily a question of engagement. So I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2016, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, but let's say you have similar experiences where you've had many years to get to the place where you are today. Your elected official, your elected representatives may be answering these questions or engaging with these ambiguities for the first time. So how do you communicate with someone who is at day 1 or day 10, who has competing priorities that have a lot of constituencies involved, and talk with them and engage in a conversation at that level, meet them where they are? And so I would even say, when we talk about conversations like what is money, what does it mean to upend or decentralize finance, probably don't start there, right? Start with the problems that your elected officials or your representatives are having with other things, and show them the ways that the digital asset industry can engage with those problems and provide them value-add solutions. And so talking about the energy markets, Texas is a great example. Oklahoma is a great example. We are a very heavily dependent oil and gas economy. What can the digital asset industry do to solve the problems that the state has around the energy production industry, whether it be something like abandoned wells or methane mitigations, to things like here in Texas, grid stability and demand response. So that would be the first thing I say is, one, please engage with your government or your elected representatives and start the conversation, because they will be driving the policies that ultimately affect the industry. And then two, meet them where they are and communicate in ways that address their problems and their concerns and their objectives. And when you can find alignment, you will very readily find champions within your state houses or your governor's office who want to advance your objectives forward because they help solve their problems. So that's what I would say first.
That's great. You didn't mention eliminating capital gains tax and spending it. So Reagan, I think that's going to unfortunately be a reality of using Bitcoin for the foreseeable future, right? And now that, you have Lightning enabling faster, more frequent payments, what are the accounting implications people need to be worried about, tracking, and, both from a tax and even just financial book standpoint?
Yeah, great question. From a tax and accounting perspective, it's still Bitcoin. So maybe there's more transactions and there's less fees, but the asset is still the same. And so from a tax and accounting perspective, the most important thing to be aware of is, what are the implications? What is the regulatory space? How is that evolving right now? There's updated accounting guidance that just came out. So understanding what the tax and accounting implications are, and then being aware of, how do I access my transaction data? And then what do I do with it so that I can do the tax and accounting reporting in a timely and accurate manner? So it's still Bitcoin. There's maybe just a higher volume and, additional use cases. So while we're excited about the expanding use cases as it relates to Lightning, it's just important to understand that the regulatory and accounting updates are changing right now. So
okay, thanks. Yeah, and it's you touched on the key point about record keeping, right? Because especially Lightning going layer 2, it's not the same as an on-chain transaction that you're definitely going to be able to go to an Explorer and see it, right? So that becomes key, so you're not scrambling after the fact. So Austin, taking it back to you, maybe, you touched on it in your intro, I'm a miner. Talk more about what that opportunity is for me to utilize Lightning and actually start making payments with the Bitcoin we're earning.
So when you think of what a miner is doing today is they are, mining Bitcoin. It's, they're getting daily rewards from the pool. So they're earning their revenue every single day. But it's usually you consume energy. There's an invoice generated at the end of 30 days. Then takes a few days to produce that invoice, get it delivered to the mining customer. And then there's maybe net 20 payment terms. And so in this example of I'm making revenue every single day, I'm consuming energy every day, but I'm not paying for it 50 days later. What's happening is there's a credit risk that's being created. And so using the Lightning Network, building software that is now going to enable a Bitcoin miner to take that revenue that they're getting every day and now pay for their energy every single day as well. So it's matching up revenue with their expenses. And so in doing so, it is about you're getting your collateral back. You're able to de-risk the contracts that you're signing if you're an energy supplier. And so you're starting to basically bring more liquidity into the space because you have energy suppliers that are now able to look at a Bitcoin miner and say, hey, this was a high credit risk before, but now it's much less of a credit risk because I'm able to settle that contract on a daily basis. But then the next thing that we lean into is the fact that in doing so, in actually providing a daily settlement, one of the first things that we hear is, well, hey, sending one invoice a month was actually quite a bit of a task. Now if there's 30 invoices or 31 invoices going out every month, that's actually going to create a whole lot more work for me. But because it's on Lightning and because you're able to basically write software that interacts directly with a payment protocol, being Lightning itself, you're able to actually really condense down all of that work. And so the way we talk about it is from an accounting standpoint and tax perspective is you're going from an invoice process, an AR process, and now you're going to a receipt process because the invoice is being paid instantly. So it's just like you're going to Starbucks and you're buying a coffee, you get a receipt. So really from an energy supplier standpoint, they're getting a receipt with all of the data and accounting already, done and over with at that moment. And the Bitcoin miner gets the exact same benefit. They have all of the detail of the energy that they bought at the component level, and it's all packaged up with, this is the Bitcoin that I spent on this energy, this was the tax basis, here's all of the granular transaction data that a Bitcoin miner would need to basically close their books at the end of the month. So there's not only the speeding up the payments and reducing that contract settlement time has incredible benefits from a risk perspective, but what we're finding with our customers is that it also just makes their lives easier from a tax and accounting perspective because you're reducing all of that time lag that's there and all of the complexity of trying to tie things out 50 days later.
That's great, yeah. And I guess sticking with this topic, Reagan, maybe, the idea of that Sonoda's offering, right, where you can make these payments in real time, you're gathering receipts, it's going to save the accounting teams, right, at the miners and the energy side a lot of time. But how does that then change their focus to maybe controls, right? Because they have these digitized contracts, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the control environment that comes with that to monitor and track.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's the Lightning Network or other data sources, everything related to tax and accounting comes back to data and getting it accurate and complete. And so from a control perspective, do you rely on a third party and you automate and make your life easier through that third party by getting your data that way? Or do you find some other way that takes potentially more time to retrieve that data? So that's a nuance that's extremely important when we talk about the Lightning Network.
Thank you. And then, W. Jackson, you talked about, helping the industry, helping the governments understand that the opportunities of de-risking the space, right? You talked about selling miners, creating grid capacity, selling back. I mean, do you see this opportunity as, hey, we're reducing credit risk by using these systems as, another bullet in that chamber, right, to help get them comfortable with the space?
Sure. So if you can reason, the best way that you can work with an elected official is reasoning by analogy. And so I'm glad Reagan mentioned that this is effectively moving from maybe the settlement and accounting into controls. If you start talking about SOC 1 compliance or SOC 2 compliance, that will click in because your regulator who's familiar in the data security space, which there may not be many, but there are at least a few, that is a mechanism for communicating all of the other benefits and having the more nuanced conversations around things like, well, if a Lightning network is established or Lightning channel is established, is that an account receivable? Is that a prepayment? Then when you start saying, well, you didn't say anything about sales tax, that is an opportunity to inform those regulations at the state level to say, well, from the operator's perspective, if the value that we're adding to a grid is X and the payments are settled on this and such or whatever, here's how the technology works. Let me help you draft a regulation that not only benefits my operations from a miner's perspective, but also facilitates an operation, de-risk an operation, smoothing revenues, basically, can you make de-risk the business of a utility operator? That's a conversation that the industry can have, leveraging a new technology to say, this is really not that much different from all of the things you've had to learn over the last 10 years as it relates to data centers or data security. This is just one new implementation. And at the end of the day, it really is just electrons moving through a network. We're just processing it for a different value proposition.
Okay, thank you. Sticking with the accounting side of this, because again, it is a reality of any miner, any business operating the space using your Bitcoin. It's important. Reagan, maybe you can give us a quick update on, the FASB accounting standard that is going to change. It doesn't change how the IRS views Bitcoin and crypto as virtual property, but it does change how we have to account for it on our books. So maybe talk a little bit about that. And then if you guys, just to tag on, if you've talk to them, because I know the standard isn't live just yet, or have any updates on that front, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'll just do a quick recap. Previously, if you were holding Bitcoin on your books, for example, you'd be required to record an impairment loss if the value dropped below the value that you originally acquired that Bitcoin for. Now, and this accounting guidance will be final as of around a month from now, TaxBit works closely with the FASB. You will be able to record your Bitcoin at fair value with adjustments to fair value going through earnings. So this is this is momentum in the accounting space in terms of crypto accounting. Previously, the impairment loss that was required to be recorded was not necessarily reflective of the economic realities. And so moving forward, this is more crypto accounting friendly guidance that we're seeing. And this is more, this is providing better financial transparency. And if anything, should lower complexity when we think about accounting for crypto. So we're expecting that guidance to be final in about a month from now, which means that you can early adopt and close your books for 2023 with this updated guidance, which is huge.
Yeah, I think still right now, right, if you go look at MicroStrategy's financials or Tesla, they still have this big fat impairment loss, even though the Bitcoin's up well above their cost basis, because that is the rule. So again, just to echo, I mean, that makes no sense. This will be much better, and frankly, then better reduce that burden of tracking that when you are, as Lightning scales and people are using it more. So that's great. Maybe coming back to you again, Deputy Jackson, on what challenges in terms of, I think the industry's been very reactionary, right? Like we see a bad policy going up to get put in place, and then we react and have been fairly successful in keeping them out, which I think is good. But how do they become more proactive? I mean, you've given a lot of good examples about educating, engaging, but, who do you focus on? Is it what level, where do you start? Do you come with policy examples? Is it just education? Interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start at obviously the highest level, is that I think that we will probably all be in agreement that at the federal level, there's not going to be much that happens between now and February 2025 for the obvious reasons. But so you say, well, how do we make meaningful, proactive engagement? I say, one, start meeting with your elected representatives. It is actually very, very easy at the state and local level to get a meeting with your elected representatives, with your government counterparts. Just start engaging in a conversation. And it doesn't have to be about seeking an objective. Again, if you can understand what's priority for them, where their focus areas are. Bitcoin in the digital asset industry is so multifaceted, something will align with what their priorities are. So that's what I would say. Just start the conversation. And the second element to that is meet them where they are. We know a lot about this space, but even just the conversation had up here, I mean, I remember my 1 or 2 or 3 classes in accounting from undergrad, however many years ago it was. But when you start talking impairments and fair values, you are already over the head of 80% of people who are in this place. So even it's kind of checking your own vernacular, making sure I'm talking to someone who, again, maybe this is the first time they've ever engaged with anything that I'm talking about. So how to, again, start the dialogue, start the conversation, and meet them where they are. That's really where I would say start. And do it in Oklahoma, because we're going to be the best at it, I promise.
I think there's some Texans in the crowd who disagree.
Well, they're not on stage. So.
Austin, so you mentioned, that Lightning doesn't even stop with Bitcoin, right? And allowing transact. There's opportunity for stablecoins. So I think maybe touch on that a little bit and then bridge that back to, what does that mean for miners? Is that an opportunity for them? Because maybe most miners would think, well, what do I care about getting a stablecoin? I'm here for Bitcoin. So give us a little info on that.
Yeah, so when I talked about Lightning at the very beginning, and I said it is a payment network. It's how you can move value instantaneously between different parties who are on the network. What is the reality of today is that not everybody wants to hold custody Bitcoin or use Bitcoin or does it have value for them in particular as an energy supplier or a broker or somebody else in the ecosystem. And so the really great thing about the Lightning Network and about Bitcoin generally is that you're able to have instantaneous transfers into other types of currencies. So it could be directly into the dollar, but there's also now with Taproot assets, it's a sort of a new innovation in the space. Increasingly, the future is going to also be you can also use stable coins on the Lightning Network. And so when you think about the ability to use Bitcoin to transfer value, but the opportunity to still operate in local fiat currency or in a stable coin, you really start to open up what's possible in terms of who can participate on the network, different types of transactions, specifically in energy. Think about one of the main reasons why there's not a lot of investment in emerging markets from the developed world into energy infrastructure. The biggest challenge is actually repatriating those funds back to the investors wherever they reside in the world. And so when you think about these emerging markets where stable coins are extremely popular, here's an opportunity for them to pay for energy, pay for infrastructure, and the investor could be halfway around the world and be getting paid daily for the infrastructure that they've invested in. And so these are just some examples of things that when you're able to build a payment network that ultimately meets people where they are, but from a technical standpoint, you're going to be able to open up new economic opportunities, new areas of investment. And so I think just the flexibility of the Lightning Network and where that technology is going, that's really the key thing here, is that it's not just, you can only think about Lightning Network and Bitcoin. You can think about it is based on Bitcoin, but it's going to provide flexibility into all sorts of other currencies.
That's great. So we've got about 6 minutes here. Maybe talk about, I guess you've kind of touched on going beyond, just using Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. Are there other use cases beyond the stable coins? And I mean, if any of you have seen or interacted with other applications, right? There's Nostr social media, there's chat applications. I mean, and again, giving context of where you're coming from, does that have implications to your world, or what do you think?
Well, I guess I'll lead off. So I think that there is a renewed emphasis, particularly as we hear about the de-dollarization of the world and some of the alignments that are happening with, I'm not going to say malign actors, but less than friendly actors around the United States, is that there's a renewed interest in national security, in innovation in any form. And so working with national defense partners, working through the DoD and the military, I can tell you that this is an opportunity for the industry to present itself as a partner to government in a way that again, solves a problem that they have. And so can you take the innovations that are being made here for economic or personal development reasons, right, what the industry is doing, and also be able to leverage it into other applications? And so thinking national security, talking about the transition of value, information is value. So can we talk about the decentralized distributed distribution of information that's cryptographically secure and protected? I can think of a lot of applications for that just off the top of my head that we probably couldn't talk about in open spaces because, again, it's moving value. So that's just one of those things I think in the broadest sense is that because the space moves so quickly, because innovation is so integrated into all things that Bitcoin and digital assets do, is that there's an opportunity to leverage the pace and the operation that this industry moves at to effectuate outcomes in other elements, to include, as I mentioned, national security. So that's what I would say. Innovation itself is the big drawdown. One application of that is Lightning.
One thing I would just put on in a very general context, with the way that money moves today, it moves slowly, just in very general ways. And so we've had a lot of people come to us from trucking industry, from healthcare. You can think about all these different industries where there's this big lag between a product or service being delivered and then the payment actually happening. But what's interesting is when in each of these cases, if you dig below the surface and see sort of how that creates layers of inefficiency and the payment processors that are involved, our message when we talk to people is this technology is accelerating accelerating money in the economy. And so if you really look at your industry or, wherever you are working today, there's opportunities to kind of peel back the layers and see exactly where does the slowness of money actually produce inefficiency. And so that's just what I encourage people to do, is because with the ability to move money quickly, you open up a whole world of possibility. And on the Lightning Network, not only does it move quickly, but it's extremely cost effective.
Yeah, one thing I'll add, just generally speaking, is the Lightning Network and just this new technology is making crypto and the use of the technology more approachable and accessible. So if you think about consumers wanting to transfer funds to Japan for whatever reason, this technology makes, transferring those funds more accessible and approachable without even really maybe knowing that you're using the technology. And so that's what's really exciting about the space for me. In one of the sessions earlier, the topic of transactional freedom was addressed, and that how important that is. And I think, the Lightning Network and these concepts that we're talking about facilitate transactional freedom.
No, well said. Totally agree. And I mean, touching on each point, if anyone's ever had to go send a wire at a bank, right? There's no privacy. They're asking you what you're doing, why, and who you're sending it to. You have to go in physically and send it. So this is just completely turns that on its head. So I want to thank our panelists. Please give them a big round of applause. And thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for coming out to the 2023 North American Blockchain Summit. It was the best summit yet. We look forward to hosting you again next year. If you enjoyed the summit or like what you saw in this video, be sure to subscribe. If you're interested in learning more about membership in the TBC, go to texasblockchaincouncil.org to learn more.